On today's show, more single people and fewer babies. The latest population census finds Singapore continuing to have an aging population. COVID-19 self-test kits hit the shelves in all major pharmacies today, limited to 10 kits per person. Hear what some buyers have to say. And in a first for Singapore, 2 centuries-old shipwrecks have been excavated within our waters. Hello, Olivia Quay here. You're watching The Big Story live in the Straits Times newsroom. You can subscribe to our channel so you never miss a single episode. 24 new COVID-19 cases confirmed today, 5 imported and 19 in the community. Of these local infections, 16 were linked to previous cases, with 10 detected while in quarantine and 6 through surveillance. 3 cases are currently unlinked. More details will be released later tonight. In light of a growing cluster in Bukit Merah and other new cases, Finance Minister Lawrence Wong said the COVID-19 multi-ministry task force is reviewing the timing and scope of the second stage of Phase 3 heightened alert. Now, this was due to start this coming Monday, June 21st.
Scheduled to have the second stage of reopening on the 21st of June, where we will resume more activities, especially the higher risk ones like F&B dining in. Unfortunately, we've had a latest outbreak of cases, and we are likely to be dealing now with a very large cluster in Bukit Merah, where the cases are breaking out not only in the market and the hawker center, but also all around the vicinity. And day by day, we are seeing the number of unlinked cases, the cryptic cases in the community are likely to be rising too. So with these latest developments, we are evaluating the timeline and the scope of our second stage of opening. I know this is a difficult time for everyone. I want to assure all of you that we are doing our very best to control the infection, and we want to ensure that we do not have another flare-up before we reach sufficiently high levels of vaccination in our community. So the multi-ministry task force is monitoring this very closely. We are making our assessments together with public health experts, and we will announce our decisions very soon.
Well, in the same video, Mr. Wong also administered a COVID-19 test on his own, describing the process as fast, simple and very easy to use. Well, these DIY test kits are on sale from today at all major pharmacies. Multimedia journalist Kimberly Zhao files this report.
With DIY COVID-19 test kits being sold over the counter from today, I'm at a Watson's outlet in Heartbeat at Bedok to find out how well they're selling.
At this particular outlet, we do have, customers actually strolling in, in a steady stream to actually, inquire about the test kits, and some of them have actually already bought the test kits too. We have actually sufficient stocks to actually, answer to the demands of the customers.
This Watson's branch carries the Abbott PanBio COVID-19 antigen self-test, as well as the Quick View at-home COVID-19 test, which are also available at Guardian and Watson's outlets island-wide. The other kits that have been approved but not yet stocked are the SD Biosensor Antigen Self-Test Nasal and the SD Biosensor Standard Q COVID-19 AG Home Test. Watson says it is currently in talks with the other suppliers.
This kit is meant for people who are well, but have a little fear that they may get the COVID-19. Let's say the candidate has tested positive and the result is positive. They will contact the SASH PHC clinics. That means they will go directly there, and the doctor will take over and do further tests.
From noon to about 2 p.m, I saw a handful of people consulting with pharmacists before they bought the test kits.
So I'm buying this kit is actually for my daughter. She has a little bit of flu and also a bit of fever, so the symptom matches the same as the COVID-19 prescription. So we just want to make sure that it is not COVID.
My husband and I, we have a young toddler at home. And while my husband and I will be vaccinated or already in the midst of vaccination, we are aware that we might not show some of the symptoms if we ever get COVID-19. So we thought that, it's good to also keep ourselves checked quite regularly. Also, one more reason is that as Singapore progressively opens up, we expect to also receive more visitors at home. One of the ways that we can put ourselves at ease is to also get our visitors tested.
Here at Bedok, it seems that there is no rush for these test kits. Since test kits are meant for the healthy, for a peace of mind, experts are advising that if you have any symptoms, to go straight to a doctor and get a full diagnosis. Kimberly Gell for the Straits Times.
Well, thanks so much for that, Kimberly. In other news, Iron Orchard reopens today after being ordered to close for the past 4 days for deep cleaning and disinfection. But not all of its 400 retailers were ready to welcome back customers. H&M, Muji and Burberry among stores still shuttered. In a circular to tenants today, Ion said that only shops whose staff have been swabbed and tested negative are allowed to reopen. According to Singapore's latest census released today, from 2010 to 2020, our total population grew by around 1.1% each year, the slowest rate since independence. Comprising Singaporeans and PRs, the resident population stands at 5.686 million in 2020. While among the key findings, Singapore's population is still aging. If you hone in on the last set of data here, those aged 65 years and older formed 15.2% of the population in 2020, a marked rise from 9% back in 2010. The proportion of single people also rose, and this is happening across all age groups, with the sharpest increase among younger Singaporeans 25 to 34 years old. The proportion of married residents dropped slightly over the past decade by 0.6 percentage points. And for those who are married, they're having fewer children. The average number of children born dropped from 2.02 per woman in 2010 to 1.76 in 2020. Reasons for this are complex. Some reasons cited over the years range from couples marrying later and having fewer children to the financial burden and educational stresses of raising kids. Well, here to help us understand why these figures matter is senior political correspondent for the Straits Times, Grace Ho. So Grace, from 2010 to 2020, Singapore had its slowest population growth. Those 65 years old and above make up the biggest demographic of the resident population. Plus, more are staying single and married couples are having fewer babies. So how worrying are these trajectories and what are the implications for Singapore in the long term?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is something which has been going on for some time now. There were similar trends in the previous census, which was taken for the period from 2000 to 2010. Overall, if you have a graying population with fewer babies and fewer young Singaporeans, it means that there is a greater tax as well as economic burden on those who are of working age. This could be in the form of subsidies for medical and social services, or maybe cash transfers from family members to make up for shortfalls in the elderly's CPF savings. But I think generally the unique point about Singapore is that old age support is financed through an individual's own savings in CPF rather than through pensions, which are taxpayer financed. So the direct taxation burden is still generally lower in Singapore than some other countries. The second implication is that more people are needed for caregiving, right? Whether it's in terms of paid help like domestic helpers and nurses or family members. And if people drop out of the workforce to take care of their elderly, then this could affect the labor that's available for the Singapore workforce. But it's not all doom and gloom in the sense that over the last decade, the labor force participation of older Singaporeans has actually nearly doubled. So you have older people who are today healthier and they live longer than their counterparts in the past. I think the crucial thing is to encourage them to take on new job opportunities. For example, also by extending the retirement and re-employment ages. And we can also deploy older people as caregivers and volunteers in the community. So there's definitely room for them to do more. As for implications on productivity, theoretically speaking, the productivity levels, for everybody across their lifespan increases up to a certain age and then it goes down. So, some will say that, okay, if you have older people in the workforce, there'll be lower productivity levels. But that's if you look at it in a traditional paradigm, right? So if you have advances in education and lifelong learning, might we not in fact see improvements in labor force productivity? But what this means is that there will need to be serious efforts to maybe automate certain tasks or adapt the job roles so that the constraints and the skills of older workers can be taken into account. So it's all about extending the period of time until that person's productivity really starts to fall very sharply.
Right. Well, great points there to, I guess, underscore the importance of understanding these population data. Well, Grace, let's focus now on the education aspect. The census also found that people here are better educated. Now, residents across different age and ethnic groups attained higher educational qualifications over the past decade. So what would that mean for white and blue-collar work? Does it mean that, more white-collar jobs need to be created? And at the same time, how do we find people to fill blue-collar positions?
Yeah, so we've all seen what's happened during COVID-19 with the construction delays, manpower shortages. The reality is that some level of immigration and foreign labor in Singapore is still needed, especially for blue-collar positions, which Singaporeans may not want to take on. But even within this group, some companies are given the feedback that certain nationalities are now harder to attract to Singapore because conditions back home for them have improved. They can draw a decent salary elsewhere. So for blue-collar workers too, we have to improve hygiene factors like work safety, pay, living and transport conditions. As for white-collar jobs, there's been a lot of talk about how we need to pivot to new growth sectors after COVID-19. So much has been done to equip Singaporeans with new skill sets to thrive in this new age. I think the bigger concern now is not just whether you have a university degree to take on white-collar jobs, but whether you have the right skills needed. So there has been a perceptible shift in thinking about what constitutes a good education. In other words, just because you went to a fancy university doesn't guarantee that you will always have a good job. So at a deeper level, we have to reevaluate what we consider as important, impactful, and essential occupations and broaden our definition of success. I think the bottom line is that as long as you can keep the economy growing, there will be that capacity to absorb the labor. And then on the skill side, to also make sure that workers have what it takes to succeed in the workforce.
Right, of course. Well, moving on to religious affiliation, while Singapore remains religiously diverse, there are growing numbers of Singaporeans who cite no religious affiliation, 20% in 2020 compared with 17% back in 2010. What were the interesting points in this particular area for you, Grace?
Yeah, so this proportion has actually been going up from 17% in 2010 and then 15% in the year 2000. And the increase has taken place across all age groups and most types of educational qualifications. Although the prevalence is higher among the more educated, younger Singaporeans and Chinese Singaporeans. In fact, more than 1/4 of Chinese residents had no religious affiliation last year, compared to 0.4% of Malays and 2.2% of Indians. We're not quite sure the reasons for the specific racial breakdown yet, but we have to stress here that just because you don't have a religious affiliation doesn't mean that you're an atheist. It may just mean that you don't identify with any particular religion at this point in time. Maybe Singaporeans are taking time to explore different religions and to be firm, when they finally land on one. But what is important is that we maintain a secular approach to governing Singapore. Given that the proportions among the various religions, as well as those without a religion, seems to be evolving with time. And what that means from a policy standpoint is that you don't prefer one religion over another, or you don't prefer religion over non-religion. And it's also important that minority faiths have their identities secure in Singapore, and that we do our best to ensure that the freedom of religious belief is sufficiently protected.
Well, the ethnic composition of the population has remained stable, with 74.3% Chinese, 13.5% Malays and 9% Indians. What sort of bearing does race-based data have on how we address race issues in Singapore, especially with recent cases of racism and xenophobia coming to the fore?
Yeah, so Sabbath pointed out that when we discuss race-based data, this tends to sort of racialize and magnify some of the differences between your ethnic groups. If you take education, for example, the proportion of university graduates last year was more than 30% for Chinese, close to 11% for Malays, and about 41% for Indians. So, but if you take a step back and you look at it objectively, tracking such data is relevant and is done with the best of intentions to ensure that no group is left behind and that we can identify where the pain points are. So, for example, if you have a problem and you have a sense of how many people are involved, what's the size of the problem, then you can start to drill down to root causes. In cases where the issue is specific to certain ethnic groups, then you can also rope in their self-help groups or even religious groups to address these issues at a very targeted or community level. The whole point of the race-based data really is to see if there are any gaps and to try and bridge those gaps. There are no easy answers because you have to balance that desire to solve an issue with all the sensitivities that come with it. And it's not likely that Singapore will reach a post-racial stage anytime soon, or that we can ignore differences of race, religion, or language. More fundamentally, it's really for a reminder for everyone to make a conscious effort to prevent discussions on these issues from descending into finger pointing or divisiveness.
Right. Well, thank you very much for the insight, Grace. I've been speaking with Grace Ho, Senior Political Correspondent for the Straits Times. You can read all about the census key findings at straitstimes.com and look out for a second set of data which will be released on Friday. Meanwhile, an update on the Toa Payoh incident where 2 teens were electrically shocked. The Bishan Toa Payoh Town Council said today that a small tear in the live wire installation inside the lamppost is the likely cause. The Town Council had told ST that works were done to, quote, rectify the finding and that 3 other lampposts nearby were replaced as a preventative measure. Buyers will have to wait longer for their Teslas, with delivery delayed by 2 to 6 months because of a worldwide chip shortage, high demand and the pandemic. Early buyers can expect to receive their Model 3 Compact next month, which is also when Tesla plans to open its servicing center at the former Tan Chong Motors Nissan dealership facility in Toa Payoh. Known for going against the grain, the company has appointed a non-automotive executive as its country manager here. How's this for a blast to the past? In a first for Singapore, 2 shipwrecks, one possibly dating back to the 14th century, have been excavated within our waters. Both wrecks were found off Petra Branca and bore Chinese ceramics as their primary cargo, which you could see in museums here from the end of this year. Bringing these artifacts to the surface was a difficult process. Have a look.
Battling strong currents and low visibility, researchers conducted diving operations to recover artifacts from Shipwreck 1 between 2016 and 2019. Excavation works on Shipwreck 2 were carried out from 2019 to 2021. The challenging conditions, coupled with monsoon seasons, often meant that diving down to the wrecks was limited to a week at a time during the best of conditions. The location of the dive sites also limited dive time per day.
Most of the challenges were environmental, so we've got the monsoon, we can't go out there and it's just too rough. Even when we're working, if the typhoon is coming down through the South China Sea, sort of between the Philippines and Vietnam, then there's this massive swell that makes its way all the way down to where we're working, so we can be in one position 1 second and we can be 10 meters behind the next, and sometimes doing a somersault in between. So that's challenging. And similarly, the strong currents can reduce the visibility. Some days it's like being in a swimming pool, it's beautiful, we can see many meters, and other days we have to crawl our way back along our baseline to try and recover or find our mooring line so we can go back up to the vessel. It's just completely pitch black. So we have challenges like that, and of course the long distance, so it's a long commute. It gives me a chance to read the Straits Times on the way out, and most of my fellows sleep on the way there and back.
After all that hard work, the wrecks have yielded their treasures. A wide range of ceramics in a variety of colours was retrieved. A large quantity of zinc ingots, along with parasols and figurines, were also found at the site of the second wreck. Samples of organic materials, which may have been used for packing or used as trade items, were also collected. Pieces of agate, a type of semi-precious stone, metal beetle nut cutters, and musical instruments were among the finds. In addition, 4 anchors and 9 cannons were also recovered from Shipwreck 2. The cannons are typical of those mounted on East India Company merchant ships during the late 18th and early 19th centuries, and were used for both defense and signaling.
The Straits Times' journalist Ng Keng Jin has been pursuing this story. He's here to share more. Welcome to the show, Keng Jin. Well, the discovery of the shipwrecks is only coming to light now, but the excavation project has been going on since 2016. Tell us more about that.
Hi, Olivia. Thanks for having me. So, yeah, you're right. The excavation has been going on since 2016, but it's actually, well, what we know is that there are two shipwrecks. So it's a bit of a story to follow. But what happened was that there were artifacts found in the vicinity of Praja Branca by commercial divers in 2015, and they were civic-minded, and they decided to hand over these to the IC's Yusof Ishak Institute. And researchers then dated these ceramic plates to the 14th century. So this 14th century finding was enough to convince researchers that they wanted to conduct a survey in Praja Branca in 2016, and that's when the first wreck was located. Researchers then took about 3 years, so between 2016 and 2019, to conduct an archaeological excavation. And it was in 2019, towards the end of the excavation of Shipwreck 1, that they decided to survey waters around Praja Branca. And this was when Shipwreck 2 was reviewed, and researchers believe that Shipwreck 2 belongs to that of merchant vessel Shah Munshah, which sank in 1796. So an excavation for the second shipwreck has been taking place since 2019 this year. And I'm sure one of the questions you're wondering is, why did it take so long for these excavations or these findings to be announced, since the first shipwreck was found in 2016? And one of the reasons was the very real threat of looting, which has been common for historical shipwrecks in Southeast Asian waters. In fact, the NHB said earlier today that when the first wreck was located in 2016, there was some evidence that suggested that looting had taken place.
Well, Keng Jin, could you help underscore the significance of this find, the fact that it involves marine archaeology versus something land-based?
Well, Olivia, to put things in a nutshell, this is the first time in Singapore that a historical shipwreck has been found and excavated. It's significant because other archaeological excavations that have taken place here have been land-based, whether in Fort Canning or in Empress Place, and the latest one of note took place in Empress Place in 2015. And as far as I know, that has been the direction for archaeological surveys here. That has been land-based. So it's really nice and surprising that an accidental find in 2015 has sort of shifted focus towards what the waters can uncover. And I think moving forward, NHB is not ruling out the possibility of conducting more maritime archaeological excavations, but at the moment what they're saying is that these two shipwrecks found in 2016 and 2019 are going to keep their hands full for a while, and a lot of research is going to have been done is going to be done in the coming years to figure out what exactly the significance of the artifacts that are being found are. And I guess for Singapore as a whole, you know, we always talk about our maritime history and the significance of the shipping industry. Even now, if you do a quick Google search, it says that maritime industry contributes 7% to Singapore's GDP. And for all that shipping history that we've never had a historical shipwreck found here. So I guess now when we're talking about Singapore's maritime history and maritime heritage, this is the first time that we can actually have something to show for it. And it's going to be hopefully the first of many finds moving forward in coming years.
Right. Well, this story is certainly very interesting. So thank you very much for coming on the show to share more, Keng Jin. That was my colleague, Keng Jin, journalist at the Straits Times. For more on this discovery, there are pictures, videos, interviews and more on ST's website. The link is in the description below if you're watching us on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel by hitting the red button below. I'm Olivia Quay. See you tomorrow on The Big Story.